is Nairobi's energy use affecting the climate, and how could we decrease the harmful toxins that are being released? So today's show is going to be all about the energy situation in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. With me, I have some experts that are going to help us deep understand what really is going on in that part of the world. Next to me, I have the former Minister of Environment, Jan Oliver, who has graduated with several degrees in biology, chemistry, geoscience, and environmental science. We also have with us Margot Johnson, a scientist who has traveled the world around and gathered information about the uses of different types of energy sources. So Margot, could you please explain what the energy situation in Nairobi looks like today?
So the energy sources in Kenya have increased a lot the last 5 years, and this makes Kenya the country with the fastest electricity growth in Africa. However, only about 45% of the population have access to electricity in their homes, and this is a very low number compared to other cities in the world. Kenya is right now in a bigger need of energy and are investing a lot in geothermal energy, which is an energy that has been shaped from the Earth's formation and from the decomposition of radioactive elements in the center of the Earth. Hydroelectric energy is a source that is being used the most right now in Nairobi. It stands for about 50% of the electricity used during a year. And next come the diesel generators, which stands for about 30%. Then comes the geothermal energy, which stands for about 90%. And then the solar energy and the windmill stands together for about 1%.
So what are the future plans?
The plan right now is to make geothermal energy bigger and decrease the hydroelectric power plants. And this is very important because the country is now investing a lot in wind and solar energy, which cannot always produce enough energy for the country. And they're right now using about 170 kilowatt hours per capita, and are mainly using a variety of the main sources, biomass, oil, and the renewable sources like geothermal energy and hydroelectric energy. Petroleum and biomass are their main sources of energy and are together covering about 80%.
Okay, so can you please tell us a little bit about the different energy sources?
Of course. Well, hydroelectric energy in Nairobi has ever since the 1980s decreased from about 80% to 50%. It is calculated to have decreased even more in 2035, estimated to be around 15%. And this is due to the problems that have come up recently with the hydroelectric power plants, which used to be Nairobi's most reliable power source. This is because of the recurrent drought periods, and that results to the water reservoirs not being able to fill up fast enough to keep the production going. And the reason for the reservoirs not being able to fill up enough is because the water evaporates much faster than before, and that is due to the global warming that causes the country to heat drastically.
What are the economical aspects when talking about energy production in Nairobi?
Nairobi uses a lot of non-renewable energy sources, and from an economical perspective, biomass and oil are good energy sources since their efficiency is about 90%. And biomass is a stable energy source with well geographical assets, and oil gives a stable and a large-scale electricity production. The oil production cost is very low, and the oil market is working quite well. But as we all know, the production of biomass and oil have some disadvantages with it. And some examples of that is that it's very hard to secure the delivery of bigger volumes. The emissions of carbon dioxide are extremely large, and the techniques to decrease the carbon dioxide emissions are too expensive for the country to handle. The decomposition of fossil fuels entails a big impact on the landscape and the infrastructure, which is very bad for the country's sustainable development.
What are your thoughts on this matter, John? How would a scientist explain the situation?
Yes, so to really understand why the energy situation in Nairobi is like this today, we have to take a look at the different aspects and elements that affect the climate and the availability of different energy sources. So, for example, Nairobi has an altitude of 1800 meters, and that has a lot to do with the winds and how fast the winds blow in Nairobi. And yes, the fast winds together with the Coriolis effect and the fact that Nairobi is located near the equator contribute to the amount of water that enters the face of Nairobi in the form of rain. The only problem is then that Nairobi has a lack of rivers and lakes where they could possibly store the water so that they later on would convert the kinetic energy of the water into electricity. So as I mentioned before, Nairobi is located close to the equator, and that means that the radiation that encounters the face of Nairobi comes at an angle that is not as great as in regions that are located further from the equator. And that means that the energy that Nairobi receives is much greater, much better concentrated, and thus they have the possibilities for securing the sunlight as their main source of energy.
So do you think there could be any improvements that could be made?
Yes, as you can probably tell, Nairobi's energy situation is not the best, so there are a lot of different improvements that could be made. Windmills could be placed on the mountaintops so that the high traveling winds could be harnessed. And yes, as I mentioned before, they are very high traveling speed winds because the pressure is much lower and the friction is lower there, and that's why they are as fast as they are. They could also make and place artificial lakes and water plants where they could save the rainwater and maybe later on convert it to electricity.
Wouldn't the environment be affected negatively if such improvements were made?
Yes, of course. A lot of ecosystem would be destroyed, and probably animals and a lot of people would be delocalized. But I still believe that it could be worth it, and that's based on the positive outcomes that come with hydropower plants. Hydropower plants give stable and large-scale production of electricity, and it's very large scale because the efficiency could amount as much as 90%. But of course, when we speak about renewable energy sources that are available in Nairobi, we have to mention the sunlight. There should not be any doubt about if it is possible to use sunlight as the main source of energy. And that's because a city well known called Berlin, and is the capital city of Germany, has successfully based their energy production only just on the sunlight, and they receive only a third of the amount of energy that Nairobi receives. So yes, I believe that Nairobi should invest in voltaics, and in that way they could harness the sunlight. But I also believe that they should find a way to store energy so that they do not have to produce a lot of energy the whole time. And two different methods that are very reliable and very effective could be Tesla batteries and converting the electricity into hydrogen. And that means that they turn the electricity into just gas, hydrogen, so that they could store it in large volumes and probably convert it back to electricity so that they can use it later when they
Thank
need
you
it.
for being with us and teaching us about Kenya's situation today and how they could improve it. So a quick summary would be that Nairobi uses a lot of non-renewable energy sources to produce electricity, and that is mainly due to the economy. But they are also fortunate with geographical advantages, and therefore they have the possibilities for making the energy production very sustainable. They could, for example, install photovoltaics and in that way harness the sun's radiation. They could also store energy for later with different methods, such as Tesla batteries and hydrogen plants. That was all for today's show. Thank you for listening.